Alrighty, here we are, and today I wanted to talk about some starch standards. Now, starch standards are some benchmarks that I like to train people to or to get them as close as possible, not because I have any scientific studies that say that you need to get to this standard or you need to get to this weight, but throughout my career, throughout what I've experienced as both an athlete and a coach, I think that these are good numbers to chase. And the reason why I think standards are important is because often when it comes to training is a lot of people just start doing stuff and they just start loading, but they forget to progressively overload. Now, where do they forget to progressively overload is generally their connective tissue work, their joint work, their muscular work. Very few people are going to struggle to think about progressing their squat, their deadlift, their bench. So almost everyone is going to understand that they should probably be doing stuff to get their deadlift heavier, their squat heavier. But a lot of people don't know where they should get or what they should even aim for when it comes to stuff like calf training. So when I go through the Starch standards, realize that you do not have to achieve these standards. If you don't achieve these standards, it doesn't mean you're going to be in pain, that you're going to have all these problems, that you're not going to be able to perform at your best. But I will say that the closer I get people to these standards, or when I do get people to these standards, things tend to work out well. Now, remember, we're humans. We live life. We're going to have setbacks. We're going to have pain. We're going to have injuries. Doesn't matter, right? Think about the strongest men in the world who are deadlifting 1,000 pounds. They still get injured, right? You have if you can pull 1,000 pound deadlift, you are a strong person, and they are still battling with human. So I'm gonna go through these. I've been sick, so that's why I sound all wacky and weird. So hopefully this video turns out all right. Now I'm gonna group the calf and soleus together in this video because they are the plantar flexors. Just a quick reminder that when we run, the calves are going to do less work when we run. So they do around 3.5 to 2.5 times body weight. And then the soleus is going to do that 6 to 8 times body weight. Now, we're going to discuss today how that is internal force. That's not actually external force. So that's the force the muscle is producing internally. But remember, these are your plantar flexors, and we abbreviate plantar flexors to P-flex for short. So if you ever see me do that, that is plantar flexors. And where should we get our calf training? Well, the thing that we need to do is we need to take what we've learned about the different types of adaptations, and then we're going to kind of flesh this out, so to speak. So we know that we have the joint, we know that we have the muscle, we know that we have the connective tissue, we know that we have the nervous system, right? So let's go ahead and start. We're discussing muscles right now. So if I go and I draw those different areas, what would the Starch standard be for the joint? Which kind of doesn't make sense because we're talking about a muscle. But obviously, when it comes to the calves and soleus, they deal with plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. So for our standard, the joint is the ankle. So for what we need the calf to be able to achieve length. So one of our standards is that we need dorsiflexion. And in your program, I've had you do a dorsiflexion test where we go with the knee to the wall. So one of my Starch standards is the dorsiflexion wall test. And we need to be able to achieve that without issue, right? So if we can't do that, that's something that we need to work on. But we've already kind of addressed that normally in the opening weeks. Or if I haven't, you will do it. So the joint needs to be able to dorsiflex. And then obviously it needs to be able to plantar flex, but I care more about the dorsiflexion because plantar flexion normally is not an issue of, plantar flexion is not going to be restricted as much about the joint. Dorsiflexion, you've now got the bones of the foot, you've got the talus, you've got all these bones in the foot that are going to stop dorsiflexion. It's a lot harder to get dorsiflexion than it is plantar flexion because at the top of the foot, there's not a joint capsule that's actually stopping you. So for our standard, we need to be able to pass our dorsiflexion wall test. And I have two different tests that I have people do. We have the fist to the wall, which is going to be what you need for a back squat. Now, we need more range of motion for a back squat than we do for running. But when we run, our shin, so this is our foot and ankle, and this is our shin has to fall forward, and that creates that stretch in the Achilles, right? So when we land on the ground, we're going to have that shin fall forward, and then the soleus and quad are going to put on the parking brake. So if we don't got dorsiflexion, that's a problem. But I don't want to spend as much time today on that because we have a separate assessment for that. So this is how I can create standards for any muscle group or joint by doing this. Okay, so now let's talk about, well, to make the muscles awesome, we've got the muscle. So these should be all familiar from your lectures. This is where all the lectures come back to help. Well, with the muscle, we know that we've kind of been a little reductionist, and we've said that the muscle is kind of, we've got slow twitch fibers, we got fast twitch. Now, the truth is there's intermediate fibers, which are kind of a hybrid, but we don't need to get that far into the weeds in a training program. That's ridiculous. Trust me, it is. So if we go here, let's go ahead and start with slow twitch. Sorry, I'm all snuffy. Slow twitch fibers are our endurance fibers, right? They are the ones that are going to go forever. So a lot of you have done this, but for slow twitch, what is our standard? And remember, I'm grouping the calves and soleus together. We should be able to do, right, one set of 25 full range of motion calf raises on a single leg. And that is going to be where we don't use momentum, where we get to the same height every repetition, so we get full plantar flexion. And this is going to be where, one set of 25. Now, that is for everyone. I want people to be able to get between 25 and probably 35 if they are going to be running longer events like a half marathon, marathon, or ultra or longer. So if people are running longer, I'd like to see that closer to 35. If people are now doing ultras, I'd like to see this closer to 50. So this would be like half marathon to marathon. So I'm just going to put marathon. If someone's doing like a mountain ultra marathon where they are gaining like 20,000 feet, then this would be what I want to see closer of. Now, what did I say in the beginning of the video? It's not wrong if you never do a set of 50 calf raises and you run ultra marathons. I know plenty of ultra runners who probably can't do a set of 50 calf raises that are still successful. But would it be awesome if you were able to get to that point if you were running mountain ultra marathons? Yes. So the reason why I set the standard super high is because then it gives you something to train for years. So it might take you a few years to be able to do one set of 50 calf raises where you are going through a full range of motion. So what we're going to understand is when we do slow twitch, we're at body weight, right? So this is just you raising up and down with your body weight. If you don't have any additional weight, you should be able to get full plantar flexion where we see wrinkles in the Achilles. And we're going to find out how this is going to change once we get to fast twitch fibers. So I give a high standard because I want you to keep progressing, right? What I don't want calf training to turn into is, oh, I just did calves. No, we need to constantly and progressively increase our capacity. We need to upgrade the muscle, the joint, the connective tissue, and the nervous system. We need to constantly do that. And so if I give you these numbers, you'll chase them, right? So with our slow twitch work, we know often slow twitch work is really easy to do after a run's done, right? The reason why you could theoretically do it before a run, but think about that. If you go and slam like 4 sets of like 20 single leg calf raises, you're going to be pretty fatigued if you're going for like a 60-minute long run. So it's a lot easier to do this work after your run or on a separate day. Now, people are going to ask me, well, once I'm training myself one day, how often do I do calf work? What I tell people is, generally, we should be doing something to upgrade the calf and soleus every 2 to 3 days, because we saw that the soleus was the number one muscle that we use when we run. Now, we're grouping the calves and soleus today, but since it is the number one muscle we use when we run, we need to treat it like it is. And so I say about every 2 to 3 days, we should be doing something to upgrade our capacity. Now, remember, depending on how much you're running, how sore you are, how tight you are, you're going to have to pick your weapon, right? So we talked about almost like the Mortal Kombat character where it's like Sub-Zero, Reptile, Johnny Chang, right? Sometimes you're not going to be able to do heavy calf raises because you're so sore. You might have to do isos. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do a heavy iso. You're going to have to do a long iso. Other times you're going to have to do stretch and isometric flex. So the important thing to remember is that I think about every 2 to 3 days, we need to be doing something. Now, notice how I didn't say it has to be a high intensity effort, but every 2 to 3 days. And it's tough. It honestly is tough. One of the hardest things is for runners, for ultra runners, for people who are training for the military is, well, I'm already doing a lot of volume when it comes to running, rucking. My calves are beat up and sore. And this is almost like there is some truth to it. Obviously, if someone is running 100 miles a week, they need to do minimal effective dose for calf training. But one of the reasons why people get into this conundrum is because they never start with a solid foundation of calf training, and then the dog gets too far off the leash, and then it's hard to get the dog back. So I want you to think, if you gave the dog a bunch of slack, say you're walking a dog who's really hyper, if you let that dog get too far away from you, it's hard to get him back. So what happens is people never build a solid foundation where they're doing weekly calf training. And then what happens is they start upping their mileage, and then they get to this SpaghettiOs part where they're like, wow, I'm doing 60 miles a week. But now if I start adding in calf training, my calves are so underdeveloped and weak compared to my run that I'm just going to be sore all the time. That's why when I train people, I'm so adamant about building the foundation of force, right, of the joints, bones, muscle, and connective tissue. Because if we're consistent in calf training, we shouldn't get absolutely beat up from it. Now, anytime you overload, you do something new, you do a new exercise, or let's say you did it, there is going to be some soreness and tightness, but if we're consistent with training, actually it will help with that, because remember, muscles tend to get really tight and really sore when they're not keeping up with the demands. Now, remember, here's the rule. When it comes to soreness and tightness, if we are sore after every single workout, and when I mean sore, I mean abnormally sore. If we were abnormally super sore for 3 to 4 days after a calf training session, something's going on, right? Also, if you're never sore, something's going on. So we should be sore some of the times, other times a little bit sore, sometimes we're not sore. But here's the deal. If you're never sore, if you're never tight, if you're never beat up, there's probably no challenge, there's probably no overload, there's probably no growth. Because what do you have to do to grow? You have to take your body and say, hey, here's demands that you can't handle right now. I'm going to slowly expose you to those demands, right? So that's a lesson from bodybuilding. In bodybuilding, you shouldn't, say you're bodybuilding, after every chest workout, you shouldn't be sore. After a lot of them, you should be sore. But if you weren't sore at all after any workouts, I would question whether you were doing enough. But if you were after every session sore to death, something would be up, right? So for us, I want 25 reps no matter what you do, what your sport is. If you play pickleball, cool. If you are just a soccer mom, cool. I want one set of 25 full range motion calf raises When you get to plantar flexion, which is heel as high as possible, we see wrinkles in the Achilles. Now, I'm going to contradict myself in 2 seconds here on purpose. So, how do we set, that's the Starch standard for slow twitch. Now, ideally, like I said, if you're running ultras, 1 set of 50. I do like to get people where they can do 4 sets of whatever their goal is. So if you're running 5Ks and stuff, probably 4 sets of 25. I do like to get people where they're doing that in their training. But that is what I like to do in training, is get them to do 4 sets. But in testing, I would just want to see this. Okay. Sorry guys, I was sick. I was sick yesterday. So, but I wanted to get this lecture out. I was supposed to have had it out 2 days ago. So, fast twitch. Fast twitch is more of our strength. Remember, when it comes to the muscle, we've got endurance with the slow twitch, and then we have strength, which is the fast twitch. So, for fast twitch, we're going to flip the script. What we want to see with fast twitch is, ready? We're not thinking about reps anymore, so time under tension or reps. We are now thinking about weight. So, here is my standard. I want people to get to, so at a minimum, 0.5 times body weight for probably like 6 reps of a single leg calf raise. Notice how it's always single leg. And this is going to be, so here, I want to see full plantar flexion because you are unloaded. It is just you moving your weight. You should be able to see full plantar flexion here, which is heel as high as possible, wrinkling the Achilles. Here, the standard changes. I only want to see you get to parallel or slightly above. And you guys know me, I love writing and drawing, even though it takes me a second. So, one more time. When it comes to our heavy calf work, for the calves, to get a stimulus, because the calves produce more force in dorsiflexion because they're under a stretch than they do in plantar flexion. So when they're in plantar flexion, which is a short range of motion, they have active insufficiency, which you guys know when you do your short side hold-its, how weak you are. So the calves and soleus are some of the strongest muscles in the body. If we are doing calf raises where you start with your foot flat on the ground, which is neutral, and then go heel high, that is not enough load to challenge the fast twitch fibers of the Achilles and soleus. It's not even remotely close. Not even close. So here's the rule. If we look at this, I'm going to pull up a photo. If I'm here, so here's a great photo. If you look here on the right, so look here on the right at this screenshot. This is a person doing a calf raise off a step. And right now they're in slight dorsiflexion, so their heel is slightly below. What we want to do is when we're doing calf raises, we want, whether they're off a machine, if they're not off a machine, we want to get on a small plate or a small step like you see here. But when we go to do heavy calf raises, and heavy calf raises is where we're under load. Now, for slow twitch, we can use weight, but most people are going to get clapped up by just body weight variations. For slow twitch, we're generally training at body weight or maybe a 20-pound vest. It's very rare anyone progresses past a 20-pound vest. Normally, we just build out volume. So we try to do 4 sets of 25 versus 2 sets of 25. So if you look right here at this photo, heels are slightly below, so that it would be slight dorsiflexion. When we do a heavy calf raise, we only need to get the heel to parallel or heel slightly above, maybe 5 degrees, 10 degrees. You're not going to measure above. I'm going to show you what we don't need. So if I go here, snuffleupagus. So if I take this right here, if you look at both, let's look at the left versus the right. If we look at the left, this is almost full plantar flexion here on the left. That is what we do not want to see when we are doing heavy calf work. We do not want to see that because here is the principle. If you can fully plantar flex it's not heavy. It's not even remotely close to being heavy enough. For heavy calf work, we generally want to be above 80% of a rep max. And remember, the soleus is one of the strongest muscles in the human body, and you are loading it every day because when you're walking, you are loading your calves and soleus. So we need to load them heavy. Now, on the right here, that's pretty good. I'd say that's pretty fair. That's like slightly above parallel. So if we pick a weight that we can do this on the left, it is not heavy enough. Now, there's an exception. There's always an exception to the rule. If you are dealing with Achilles issues, like if you're dealing with Achilles issues, plantar fasciitis, or if you're coming off an injury or you've got pain, of course, if we have pain, we can't load heavy when we're in pain. Or if you've got like an Achilles issue, so if you've got like an Achilles insertional issue and you go into the stretch and you get like this nipping in your Achilles, or you get or if you have plantar fasciitis, okay. Well, obviously, right? That's an obvious statement. If you can't load heavy, then we'll load light and build our way there. Just because we've got pain or problems doesn't mean we're going to avoid dorsiflexion. We need to develop that capacity. So, but on the right, this is a good example of about the highest we would want to go for heavy calf raise. What you're going to notice is, so if I just switch the screen here, you are going to notice every single person. So if I go this, we grab this chick right here. She's got a good stretch there, so you can see she's stretching. But on the top, full plantar flexion. So this would be great for slow twitch, but guess what? When people are doing this, they're not thinking about, am I training slow or fast twitch? They're just doing calf raises. This is not, so she might be demoing this. I'm not mad. This is not going to be effective. What you'll notice is, one more time, I'm going to show you how all these people are not doing anything wrong. This is not enough load for the soleus and calves. It is not enough load for the soleus and calves. Now, one of the things you should learn with me is I've done a video. So notice here, this is a seated calf raise. But you guys should have learned from me that when you see this high toe position, this is going to overload the FHL, which is the deep toe flexor. This is not going to do anything for the calves and soleus. So this is great for developing strength in the toe flexors, worthless for the calf and Achilles. That's why people say this is why so many people say calf training is a waste of time, because they'll do something like this and they'll load it with 10 pounds. And it's like, well, no, duh. This isn't even enough load for your FHL. Commonly for the FHL of the toe flexor, I have people doing half body weight or higher. So notice the common theme when you look at all these photos. Heels high. Here's another one. Heels high. Guys, you need to understand if the heels are getting high. So one more time, it doesn't matter whether it's seat or that. This on the right, heels too high. Heels too high. Not enough load, not enough load, not enough load, not enough load. I'm going to say it over and over and over again. Heels to parallel or slightly above, and slightly above is just a couple degrees. Heels high. So here's an example. These floating heels are great for when people are just first getting started. It's great for developing the foot and toe flexors. So these floating heels are great. So when you see this, look at how to target the soleus. With this floating heel, no, this is not doing anything for the soleus. It's loading the toe flexors, and that's it. It's actually deloading the soleus. Okay, one more time. That is still a little bit higher than I would want to see. You guys are going to get sick of me saying it. You're already like, Taylor, I get it, I get it, I get it. No, I need you to remember it until you die. This is not wrong. So when you see this on the right, I don't want you to think it's wrong. I want you to think it's great for the toe flexors, shitty for the calves and soleus. So when you get really high and see right now how the toes are stretching? Toes are stretching, heels are high. That's great for the toe flexors. Phenomenal. So this is actually a great way of loading your toe flexors. So I could spend an hour just telling you to do that because that will change everything. One more time. If you're injured, if you have Achilles issues, if we're working through an injury, of course, we've got to be smart about how heavy we go. But my rule is we should, at minimum, be able to do half body weight. So if I weigh 200 pounds, the bare minimum I need is half body weight. But here's the truth. That is still not enough. I actually want 1 times body weight for the same thing. For 6 reps, 6 reps. When I say 6 reps, you would finish the 6 rep and you would try to go for 7 and you would fail the 7. That's a good sign that the weight is heavy enough. Single leg, parallel or slightly above, 1 times body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, I'm talking 200 pounds on a barbell, on a Smith machine, on a safety squat bar, on a machine. Now, obviously on the machines, you got to account for a couple things, but 1 times body weight. So for me, I weigh 175 pounds. That means I should be able to put 175 pounds on a barbell. I should be able to go into a full dorsiflexion stretch, so full stretch. Then I will get to parallel or slightly above parallel and do that 6 times, and on the 7th rep, I would not be able to get back up, okay? Now, that is going to be what we need. I want you to think of yourself and almost everyone. Look at, we could spend another 30 minutes, and I bet you if I look through all those videos on YouTube, all those, what you're going to see is you're going to see people that are, they're trying to overload their fast twitch fibers, but they're doing it with a slow twitch strategy, but they're not even hitting the calves, they're hitting the FHL. Not wrong, but it's not going to work. Now, here's the truth. We need to do both of these. We need both strength and endurance. Someone might be better at the other. You might have someone who can do 25 single leg calf raises fairly decently, and then they are abysmally weak here. So let's say you weigh 200 pounds. Someone might only be able to do 50 pounds for 5 reps, and they're already at failure. That means we are severely lacking here. Vice versa, you might have someone be able to clap out some pretty decent weight. Maybe they get 0.7 times body weight, but they cannot do even 1 set of 25 before they're tanked. Now, this is going to be super important. Why 1 times body weight is confusing? It's just whatever you weigh is on the bar. 1 times body weight is going to lead, so that is external force. I want you to remember, we've got internal force, which is what the muscle is producing internally. And then we've got external force, which is what is acting upon the body. And that's the weights, the barbells, the kettlebells. So it's a little confusing. We don't need to get into there's math equations. It's super confusing. But here's the cool thing. A lot of people are like, holy smokes, the Soleus does 6 to 8 times body weight. There's no way I could do 8 times 200 pounds for single leg calf raises. There's no way. That's not how it works. That is internal force, not external force. So here's the cool thing. 1 times body weight. So let's say I weigh 175 pounds. If I put 175 pounds on the bar and I do around 6-ish reps, I am producing around 6 to 8 times body weight internally. So we are getting a similar demand to the internal force as we do running. At a bare minimum, we need to be at half body weight. Bare minimum. I'm talking like anything less is unacceptable. Now, here's the cool thing. You have your entire life to head this direction. So, let's say right now you have pain problems and issues in your calf, Achilles, or ankle, or your foot, and you're just doing body weight calf raises right now. That's okay. We started easy, work our way to medium, work our way to hard, work our way to really hard. So it's really important that you understand you're at where you're at, and a lot of people need to build the base of slow twitch, and then that will allow them to go into fast twitch. Or just like anything, they don't have the tolerant, maybe someone has bad dorsiflexion. So if they have bad dorsiflexion, when they go into the stretch, it doesn't feel good. So you can see how if we don't have good dorsiflexion, we can't get a good stretch. If we can't get good stretch, we're not going to put the tissue at length. And then you guys know what that means when it comes to connective tissue training. So this is, I want everyone watching this. You're probably not going to achieve this with me because it takes a long time. I want you to be able to do on your left side and your right side 6 reps at body weight with good form. Now, you can go you can control it on the way down, but you're going to have to attack it on the way up. So you can't go slow down, slow up. When you're doing slow twitch work, I want slow up, slow down. So you should be able to control this. Generally, somewhere around 60 beats per minute is pretty good, right? Some people say we should do it at 90 beats per minute because that's what we do when we run. So somewhere between a cadence of 60 calf raises per minute and 90. Here, you need to control the eccentric, but then you're going to have to explode up on the concentric, because remember, the weight you're choosing is only allowing you to get to parallel or slightly above. Now I want you to think about all the calf raises you've done. And think about how we've falsely applied the train through a full range of motion, which is great. But for the Achilles, calves, and soleus, if we are training through a full range of motion, we are not above 80%. And the Achilles and soleus are two of the strongest tissues in the entire body. And it's been shown in research unequivocally, they respond to heavy loads best. In fact, in the research, when it comes to Achilles training, they say the heaviest physical possible load you can tolerate is what you need to do in training. Most of the time in the research, they show that 90% or above is the sweet spot. So when it comes to fast twitch training, I prefer to say whatever you can do for 6 reps, and on the 7th rep you fail. Now, here's what we do a lot of times. A lot of times I'll say I want you to do 15, a weight that you can do for 15 reps. Then maybe a week or two later, a weight you can do for 12. Then a weight you can do for 10, then 8, then 6. So that might be, we might do this for 3 weeks, we might do this for 3 weeks. But then by the time you get here, you've built up some tolerance to heavy calf raises, because it is intense, it's a stretch, and obviously we are straining in a good way the connective tissue of the Achilles tendon. So it is a lot. So we need experience. I like to think of it like driving a Formula One car. I've been driving since 16. But if you put me in a Formula One car right now and said drive as fast as possible, it would not go well, even though I've been driving my whole life. So same thing, even though you've done calf raises, most people have never done them heavy enough to heavy. So there is some experience. So often what I'll do is I'll have people start off and do 15, 12, and then we'll wave it down until so this will give you practice and also will give you adaptation and strength. So by the time you actually get to a stimulating intensity for the Achilles and soleus, you've had time to develop that tolerance. Okay? So let me erase that. Remember, do you have to achieve these to be pain-free? No. Do you have to achieve these to run a marathon? No. Are you a bad person if you don't ever get to these numbers? No. But now you have something to chase, and that is so important to life. We have to chase goals, we have to chase dreams, and we have to chase some mother freaking heavy calf work. But remember, heavy calf work, but also forever calf work. So, joint, muscle, now the connective tissue. See how all those lectures, if you don't know what tissues we're trying to adapt and how to adapt them, notice how there's a reason why I gave you lectures on the joint, muscle, and all that stuff. Because if I did this, none of this would make sense. But now you understand what I'm going for. I apologize, guys. I'm so stuffy. Thank you guys for being patient with me, just with all that's been going on in my personal life, and also that I just got sick right after traveling too. Okay, so for connective tissue, right? So for connective tissue, we know that our two main weapons are isos and eccentrics. Isos and eccentrics, right? Cool. So let's start off with isos, right? We've got, obviously, I like to mirror strength and endurance, right? So for isos, we've got more of our endurance iso, which is going to be what we can hold for, like, let's call it 2 minutes. Now, some people say 3 minutes, some people say 90 seconds, some people say a minute. 2 minutes, I think, is kind of a sweet spot. Some people hold isos for 5 minutes. I don't think it's wrong. It's just how much you hate yourself. Okay, so I like to break it up by what is my endurance in this position. So almost just like we did, where we said, okay, the muscle kind of has slow twitch compartments or endurance components, and then strength components. So if you never have to say slow twitch, fast twitch, because when you hear slow twitch, it makes it seem like the muscles don't work. Slow twitch all sounds so puny and lame. I like to think endurance muscle, endurance fibers, or strength fibers. That's the better way to think of it. So for isos, what we can do is we can say, what weight can I hold for 2 minutes? Now, for our connective tissue lectures, we've talked about holding or training in a lengthened position. So if I'm holding my heel, so let's go back. Let's see if we can find it. So if let's see if I can find a good example here. Here's a great example. Okay, so if you look at the picture on the right, she's basically holding parallel with her heels floating there. I know for a lot of the connective tissue and all of it I've been talking about, you need to be at length, you need to be at length, you need to be at length. I like to say that when we're holding for a long period of time, especially like 2 to 3 minutes, it's okay to start neutral, and just as you fatigue, you're going to drop into length. If you already start at your end range, it's not wrong. It's totally fine. It's just, it's really hard to make it 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes there just from experience. So this would be the weight I can hold starting at I like to start at neutral position. Also, I think it's really easy to quantify a little bit because I'm like, okay, I'm starting neutral. And then also, let's say you hold a weight and then after a minute, you're now in end range. And then like 6 weeks later, after a minute, you're still close to neutral. That also helps you know that you're getting a little bit better too. So I like to start in more neutral. This could be your floating heel positions. Now, do we have to start at body weight? No. So here's the rule. If I'm successful, so let's say I start at neutral and I hold 2 minutes and I don't lose any position, then I like to say it's time to add weight, right? If I can hold a position for 2 minutes, remember, if I can hold a position for 2 minutes and there is no change in position, that is around 25% to 30%. 25 to 30% of max, which is rehab intensity in my word, right? The only time you would go lighter is maybe if you were like literally days off like a surgery. Still, I would probably have you here. So anything that we can hold for 5 minutes or longer is literally, it's not even stimulating to the muscle as it is for the brain. The closer you get to 5 minutes, the more it's a mental activity and than it is like a connective tissue thing. So for our standards, what should we be able to hold for 2 minutes? Question mark. I don't know. I know that's funny because this video was the Starch standards. I don't know. Because I don't think this correlates much to anything beyond that. Here's what I know. I want you to progress, right? The one thing I talk about is progress. So I don't know where we should get with this because it kind of is like, what's the difference between holding 15 pounds and 20 pounds for 2 minutes? 20 pounds is more. So I tell people we can start at body weight, and the great thing about the endurance isos is we can do them almost anytime, right? Even when you're sore, even when you have pain. Actually, when we're in pain, endurance-based isometrics like the 30-second holds, the minute holds are going to be much more tolerable, right? That's actually, when we're in pain, we hold isos longer. What a wild concept, right? So the obvious answer is we start at body weight. Most people can almost actually hold that. A lot of people can do that with not much training at all. And then all we do is we add a little bit of weight. Maybe that's 10 pounds, maybe it's 20 pounds. It doesn't matter. And then we hold. So let's say we go to 20-pound like weight vest and we hold, and now we can hold a minute. Well, then we stay at 20 pounds and then until we can hold 2 minutes without much. If you can hold position with the weight without issue, it's time to progress. So what do we do? Progress. I have no I know where that I need you to go, but I would hope that if today you could hold an isometric calf position, if you could do that with 20 pounds today for 2 minutes, I would hope that 10 years from now, you'd be able to do a little bit more. Right? Now, that's crazy. So, what about our strength? I think this is a little bit easier to quantify. So, strength, right? So, we know that when it comes to isos, 30 second hold is generally around 80% of max. This should be familiar. Like a 10-second hold, these are just rough numbers. Remember that it's really hard to quantify isometrics because there's so many factors that go that are involved in holding it. So it's not like deadlift where it's easy. So around 10 seconds ish is like a 90%, and then like 3 to 5 seconds to me is like max effort. So 100% or max effort. Sorry, I drew a percentage there. This is seconds versus percent. You can tell my brain's still not working. So one of the, like a max effort would be what's called the Berlin protocol. This is super popular right now. It's all over the internet. It's because comes out of Berlin. That's where you do 3 seconds on at like whatever the maximal weight you can handle for 3 seconds, and then 3 seconds off. So you go 3 seconds on as hard as possible, rest for 3 seconds, and you do that for 4 reps. So, and then you do that for 4 to 5 rounds. This is the 4 to 5 rounds. So if you think about it, it's actually only like a minute under tension. It's not even like a minute under tension, but it's maximal. So the heaviest isometric protocol that I program is the Berlin, which is 3 seconds. And it's not even a hold at this point. It's almost like a push because you're not even really holding. So if you do this off a calf raise, you are giving everything you have to hold that position for 3 seconds, and then you get a little bit of a break so you can do it again. And then after 4 reps, we rest for a couple minutes, and then we try to repeat that for a few rounds. So Berlin is like max effort. So it's like max effort method for your deadlift. So you guys know that when we do max effort for a lift, we go up and do like a very heavy rep at high intensity. This is max effort for connective tissue. So we kind of have different things here where a lot of times we could say for our strength, we could get a baseline of saying, okay, what can we hold for 30 seconds? Now, the difference between like slow twitch and fast twitch, so the difference between this and muscle is generally we want to see what we can do for a few rounds here. So generally this is like 3 to 4 sets, right? Because connective tissue obviously needs that time under tension. So you could say, what could I do for one set of 30 seconds? But I would prefer to probably do what could I do for like 3 to 4 sets of 30 seconds. I think that's just better for connective tissue training. You theoretically could just see what you could hold for 30 seconds and say that's my 80% of max and then test that. Totally fine. Totally get it. But very rarely are we ever doing a single 30-second ISO. So I actually like to see what I can do for like, what can I do for 4 by 30 seconds? Is good. So one of the things you can do to kind of measure progress is you're going to say, okay, what could I do at my 80%? And then if 80% is improving, we know that everything else is improving too, because a rising tide raises all ships, right? That's great. This is good, especially if you've had chronic issues. Like, remember, if you've struggled with chronic pain, 30-second ISOs are generally that really feel-good point. Now, it's important to remember, right, if we got to be right at failure close to 30 seconds. If you get to 30 seconds and then could go for 15 more seconds, it still needs to be a little heavier. I really like the 10-second ISO. I really like this range of motion when I don't have pain or problems. So if I've had chronic pain or problems, I tend to measure success by doing kind of 30-second ISOs and progressing those. if I've got an area that has been healthy, not having pain, I haven't had injuries there, I like to do a lot of 10. I like to see how much time I can hold my 10-second ISO for, because this is strength. So, you know, what could I hold for 4 to 6 sets of 10 seconds with rest in between? Normally we'll rest. So if I do 10 seconds, I'll rest 10 seconds and do it again. Or like I said, you could make it easy and just say, I'm going to do what I can hold for 10 seconds. That is totally fine, because all I care about is progress. Now, what do I want to see here? So I do want to see the same as the above, where you just kind of find where you're at and then you progress. But I do want to get to the point where you do, so I do want to see where you can do double body weight for 10 to 30 seconds. So that would be like awesome. So double body weight would be, say you weighed 200 pounds, that you put 400 pounds on the bar and you can hold for 10 seconds. Now that sounds crazy, but remember, this is an isometric. We are strong isometrically. You're stronger than you are when you do your calf raises. And remember, this is going to be where we start in a neutral position too. So you're not doing this in end range, right? Because we gotta have some awareness to see what we can do. So this would be in a neutral position, okay? Now, that is the top of the ceiling. At bare minimum, I want you to be able to get 1 times body weight for 10 to 30 seconds. So, one more time, if I weigh 200 pounds, you should be able, at bare minimum, to put your body weight on a bar and hold an ISO for 10 to 30 seconds each leg without failing into an eccentric. So, will most people get to double body weight? No. Is it a far off standard that can allow you to train hard for the next 40 to 50, 60 years? Yes, right? How sick would that be if, like, the last day before you died, you hit double body weight ISO and then just died? That would be awesome, right? So, remember, even though in normal connective tissue land we are training in lengthened positions, we're not biasing connective tissue here. We are just using an isometric as our training stimulus. So, we're going to do all of our normal connective tissue training. This is for standards, meaning this is kind of testing to see that we have the physical capacities that we need our calves and soleus to have. So yes, theoretically, being in deep dorsiflexion would put the connective tissue at more length and would bias more. We're not doing that. We need to be in a position that is going to be safe for these high intensity loads. And if you're in deep dorsiflexion, it's not that it's dangerous. It's just like anything. There's no room for error. So, especially if you've ever done heavy calf isos, 10 seconds where you're almost at failure, it's one where if you're at neutral, you have plenty of time to bail. And also, if your heel starts dropping, you have time to get your foot back up on the step or the box. If you're in deep dorsiflexion, it's just tough to get there. Especially if you do this off like a seated calf raise. You need, like, when you do this heavy, you need a partner or someone in the gym to help you get the weight back up. Because if you start failing, you're not going to be strong enough to get the weight re-racked. So I'll say, if you're doing heavy seated calf isos, make sure you have a friend there to help. Okay, now, for the nervous system, remember a rule. Whenever we're training something, we are training all 4 elements. So when you are doing calf raises, you are loading the joint, you are stretching the connective tissue, you are working the nervous system. It's just that we're biasing. So the heavier your isos get, the more it becomes a nervous system thing. So the Berlin protocol is definitely stimulating the nervous system heavily compared to a 30-second ISO. So the nervous system is getting cooked way more in the Berlin, which is 3 to 5 seconds near maximal, than a 30-second hold. So this is also the Berlin is also a great test of the CNS. It is. Now, for eccentrics, do I have a standard? Yes, but I don't have a standard as much, because if I'm doing all the right things here with the fast twitch, if I'm doing all the right things here, If I'm doing all the right things for my strength isos, my endurance isos, my eccentric's going to be totally fine. But for eccentric, what I would like to see is that eventually you're able to do greater than your fast twitch for similar reps. So a true eccentric is a weight that we can't concentrically raise. So an eccentric is a big stress test. So if I was able to do 175 pounds for 6 reps, I am theoretically stronger eccentrically. So that's where we go up on 2, down on 1. So I would like to see that if you were able to do 175 for 6 reps, that we would be able to do above that. Now, it doesn't need to be a ton. That might be doing, so if I could do 175 would represent, that's my body weight. That would be 100% of max. One more time, that your target is to do 1 times your body weight for 6 reps each side for your calf raises. So if I'm doing an eccentric, my goal would to be at like 110 to like 120% of that. But of course, that would be where you're at like 180, 190, 195, 200. The whole point is that we should be able to exceed that, and that would be our goal. Now, a lot of people, like I said, if I need to earn my way here first, I need to earn my way here first, because if I don't know this number, I don't know what I need to do here. So order of operations, like I said, if we can't handle slow twitch, is there an order of operations here? Normally often in your programs, I like to do a week of slow twitch, a week of fast twitch. You might not notice that, and that I don't do that with everyone. I don't do that every week, but a lot of times I'll alternate. So this is a slow twitch week, this is a fast twitch week. And then we're always doing isos, right? Because we can do those more frequently. So for eccentrics, I want it to be heavier than your fast twitch strength work. And what number? I like to get people to 120% or more. Now, remember, you are going to forget all these numbers. Kind of. But I want you to realize that this is ensuring that we trained. All right, so for the CNS. We already talked about how if we are doing high intensity isos, we're training it. There will be a CNS component if we are doing super maximal eccentric. So this is also the nervous system. But for the CNS, I like to think this is where we need to work our way to single leg forward hops, which is plyos. So the most stressful and the most challenging to the plantar flexors and the Achilles is going to be single leg forward hops, or single leg zigzag hops. But single leg forward hops and single leg lateral hops, because we always want to go forward and to the side, so we're not just going the same direction. Single leg forward and lateral hops are going to be the most challenging to the Achilles and the soleus. And we should be able to do that for 30 reps, 30 to 60 reps without issue. Now, remember, we always break that down into normally sets of 10. But the single leg forward hop is our gold standard of the most stressful, in a good way. Stress is good, of plyometrics that challenges not only the bone, but the tendon and the nervous system. And remember, we have the top-down nervous system of reactive strength. So the nervous system, it needs to learn how to stiffen the connective tissue and the tendons quickly. So we should be able to do these without issue. The standard is just we should be able to do these well. Aggressively, quick. We should be able to do them very quick, very aggressively. We should be able to produce a lot of force. So single leg forward hopping. Single leg hopping is the pinnacle of plyos, and we've learned how plyometrics do not change the structure of connective tissue. They teach the nervous system, and they rewire the nervous system to operate at quicker speeds, which are what we see when we run and jump and do anything very quickly. So this is a lot. If we zoom out here, all I've done is what I did in the beginning, which is say, hey, we need to train different adaptations when we're in the gym. We need to achieve different specific adaptations. So most people think when they say, I'm going to train my calves, do calf raises. That's not wrong. But we need to be the people that say, we're not just going to do stuff, we're going to progress stuff over time. So everything I talked about today is stuff that you may never achieve. But I want you to get as close as possible. If not, I do want you to achieve it. I just don't want you to feel pressure that if you don't hit all those numbers, you're going to be wounded, broken, fragile, and you're not going to be able to do epic stuff. No, that's not how it works. But I do know the closer you get to those numbers, the more you are progressing, the more your capacity is increasing, and the more resilient. And that's how do we know that you're getting stronger, faster, better? This is how we know. Because if you're upgrading the muscle, if you upgrade the slow twitch and the fast twitch fibers, are you not better? You are. And then one more time, how do we know that we're upgrading the fast twitch? And how do we know how far we should get, right? So now you know that I'm putting the soleus and calves together. About every 2 to 3 days, we should be doing something to upgrade. Notice how that might mean every 2 to 3 days we do some plyos, or we do some ankle dorsiflexion work, or we do some bodyweight calf raise, or we do some heavy calf raise, or we do some isos. We're already doing that anyway. But every 2 to 3 days just reminds us that these muscles are not just some muscles. They are the most important muscles when it comes to running. More important than the glutes. More important than the hamstrings. Hamstrings are really important for sprinting, but most of you are not training for sprinting who are working with me. So these are going to be things that help you know where you need to get, because in a lot of your training, you have to take responsibility. There's going to be plenty of times where you say, I don't know what weights to use, and you're going to have to make a decision. And also, one day you will not be training with me, and I need you to know where to go. And this is giving you a roadmap of where to go. And then remember, people are going to ask, how long should this take? Don't even ask that. I hate setting dates on goals most of the time, because it will happen when it happens. If you're training if your goal is to actually progress stuff, you will be successful. The problem is when people don't actually have a game plan of how to progress, what they end up doing. Ready? If you're not progressively overloading, you're simply loading, but you're not necessarily progressing. These are the people you see in the gym every day when you go in the gym. There's tons of people that are loading, but they're not necessarily getting stronger, faster, better. So if I've got these benchmarks and these targets, then I know what I need to shoot for or slowly progress to. So let's say right now, you can only do one set of 18 calf raises before you start losing range of motion and cheating. Well, then we need to do more. Let's say you're signed up for an ultra marathon right now, and you can only do one set of 18 bodyweight calf raises before you lose full plantar flexion, and you start cheating and using momentum. Well, boom, we need to get that more. And guess what? If you're now able to do 30, are you better or worse? You're better. You are more. You are stronger, faster, better. If you become more progressively over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that's called winning. If we do that, we're going the opposite direction of everyone else in life. Remember, we can't be perfect. We can't perfectly prepare every tissue for every demand. But if we are becoming more, that means we can do more, right? If you are more, you can demand more of your body. If you demand more of your body and you become less, that's where we have a problem. So hopefully this was really helpful. I was excited to put this out. And this is just some of the things. This is not all of the things, right? But it's important to remember there are little lessons here. But these are going to be my Starch standards for the calves. And I want us to train to these frequently and consistently over a long period of time, aka you're training your calves until you die. All right, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this lecture.